Since the dawn of humanity, a question has stubbornly echoed through generations. Who are we? Where did we come from? And where will we go when all this is over? Science studies the body. Religion points to the soul. But between the visible and the invisible, there is a territory called paranormality. Some people, by gift, destiny, or sensitivity, seem to have been born with the key to this hidden world. Or perhaps they have learned to open portals that most don't even know exist. Mediums, sensitives who hear voices, receive messages from other dimensions, and live through experiences like conscious projection, also known as astral projection, leaving their bodies behind and returning with answers that no book could ever contain. Who are they? What can these ancestral souls teach us about life, death, and everything in between? We, at Project Consciousness, have prepared a special series to unravel the stories and the mysteries behind history's greatest mediums. Get ready, because after this, you may never see reality the same way again. Or what if I told you there was a man who managed to prove that you, yes, you, watching, have divine powers sleeping within you? A man whose body defied even death, who healed people with just his gaze, and who could enter deep ecstasy in front of thousands of skeptics. You are all gods. You just need to realize it. These are not my words. They are Paramahansa Yogananda's. And if you've never heard of him, get ready to meet perhaps the most powerful spiritual channel to ever grace the West. But before we dive into this story that will shake up everything you believe about consciousness and spirituality, I need to ask you something. If you're here, it's because you're seeking answers to the mysteries of the human mind, right? So help me out. Click that like button right now. It helps the algorithm show this content to more people who are searching for the same thing as you. Subscribe to the channel and activate the bell, because what you'll discover today could literally transform your perspective on your own potential. Let's put this into context. We're talking about a man who lived between 1893 and 1952, while the world was going through two world wars, the Great Depression, the rise of modern science. Yogananda offered something that seemed impossible at the time, the union of science and spirituality. Paramahansa. Yogananda wasn't just another Indian guru who came to teach meditation in the West. No. He went far beyond that. His lectures filled auditoriums of 10,000 to 15,000 people. Renowned scientists, political leaders, intellectuals, staunch skeptics. Everyone fell into absolute silence when he entered a state of ecstasy live on air. But here's what will strike you right away. Yogananda never identified himself as a medium. He never said he received spirits. He never held seances. He never worked with embodiment. Yet, what he demonstrated went far beyond any paranormal phenomenon you've ever seen documented. He didn't just receive messages. He became the living message itself, between the human and the divine. And today, you'll discover not only the secrets behind this transformation, but also how it can awaken something similar within you. Let's go back to India in 1893. Imagine the scenario. A country still under British rule, ancient traditions clashing with Western modernity. And in the midst of it all, in the holy city of Gorakhpur, a child is born who would forever change the bridge between East and West. Mukundalal Ghosh, that was his birth name, came into a deeply devout family. but it wasn't a blind or fanatical devotion. His father, Bhagavati Charan Ghosh, was a successful executive on the Bengal-Nagpur Railway, a man poised between the material and spiritual worlds. His mother, Gyana Prabha Ghosh, was known for her natural sanctity and keen intuition. From an early age, Mukunda showed signs that he was no ordinary child. While his brothers played with toys, he played with invisible ones. His parents initially thought it was a normal childhood imagination until they began noticing strange patterns. He described luminous friends with precise and consistent detail. I would enter states of deep stillness that lasted for hours. I had nightmares when I was away from sacred places. I cried inexplicably around people who later got sick. But it was at the age of 8 that the event that would define his entire life occurred. One night, while his family slept, the boy woke up to a luminous presence filling his room. It wasn't a dream. A female figure, whom he would later describe as the Divine Mother, engulfed him in a love so intense, so pure, that he could never translate it into human words. The experience lasted what seemed like hours, but when it was over, Mukunda was completely transformed. Imagine, you're 8 years old, and you experience an unconditional love so powerful that all your references to reality instantly expand. From that day on, talking to God became as natural to him as breathing. It wasn't a matter of faith or belief. It was direct, constant, undeniable experience. Now imagine being a teenager with these mystical experiences in a society that has no context to understand them. As he grew older, Mukunda became increasingly obsessive in his spiritual quest. It wasn't a casual or romantic pursuit. It was an almost painful hunger for truth. He visited every saint, every guru, every teacher he could find in and around Calcutta, but most encounters left him frustrated. Many masters were full of empty rituals. Others were outright charlatans. Some were sincere, but limited in their attainment. Mukunda had a natural detector for spiritual authenticity, and most failed the test. He even ran away from home several times to find his true guru. His initially tolerant parents began to worry. The young man was becoming a spiritual rebel in a society that expected conformity. One of these escape attempts nearly proved fatal. He tried to follow a group of sadhus, ascetics, into the Himalayas, but ended up lost and nearly died of hunger and cold in the mountains. He was rescued by soldiers who recognized him from the description his family had shared, and then, in 1910, the moment occurred that seemed orchestrated by destiny itself. Calcutta, any given afternoon. Young Mukunda was walking along Raigat Road, lost in thought about his spiritual quest, when his eyes fell on a familiar figure walking in the opposite direction. Familiar, how could it be familiar if he'd never seen that man before? But that was exactly what I felt, a deep, ancestral recognition that came from far beyond this life. The man was Sri Yukteswar Giri, although Mukunda did not yet know his name. An electric shock of the soul. That's how he described it later. It wasn't a first meeting, it was a cosmic reunion, as if two old souls finally met after a long separation. Sri Yukteswar himself confirmed this feeling, saying simply, "You finally arrived. I've known you would come for years." Sri Yukteswar was not a gentle and permissive guru. He was a relentless teacher, one who constantly tested Yogananda's limits. His spiritual pedagogy was unique. It combined rigorous discipline, profound scientific knowledge, and direct mystical experience. He had studied astronomy, astrology, and had an understanding of Western science that was rare among spiritual teachers of the time. Yukteswar prepared Yogananda not just to be a yogi, but to be a bridge between worlds. The tests Yukteswar imposed on Yogananda were legendary. On one occasion, He ordered the young disciple to remain alone in the ashram during a cholera epidemic that was ravaging the region. Yogananda was afraid, but he obeyed and spent weeks meditating surrounded by death until the epidemic subsided. In another test, Yukteswar pretended to be dying to see how Yogananda would react. The young man fell into utter despair until the master resurrected him and explained, "You are still too attached to the physical form. A true disciple must love the guru beyond the body." It was during these years of intensive training that Yukteswar revealed Yogananda's true mission to bring the spiritual science of Kriya Yoga to the West, but it would not be an ordinary mission of evangelization. It would be something much more ambitious, to show the Western scientific world that spirituality and science are not opposites, but faces of the same truth. The West needs to learn that God can be experienced directly, not just believed in blindly, Yukteswar said, and you will be the messenger of this revelation. It was during this period that Mukunda received his spiritual name, Yogananda, bliss through union with God, a name that was, indeed, a prophecy of what he would bring to the world. Yogananda receives a seemingly impossible invitation to participate in a Congress of Liberal Religions in Boston as India's representative. To many, it seemed like a suicide mission, a 27-year-old Indian trying to teach spirituality to skeptical Americans at the height of post-war materialism. But Yukteswar knew that the time had come. When Yogananda landed in Boston, something magical happened. His first lecture at the Congress was scheduled for a small auditorium, but word spread quickly. On the day of the event, crowds gathered outside, trying to get a seat. Witnesses describe his presence as magnetic. When he spoke, it wasn't just words. It was as if a transformative energy filled the room. People reported physical sensations, warmth in the heart, waves of peace. Some even spontaneously entered meditative states. But what set Yogananda apart from other spiritual speakers? He didn't ask people to believe. He asked them to experience. "I don't want you to have blind faith in what I say," he declared. "I want you to practice the techniques I teach and see for yourself whether they work or not. Spirituality should be scientific, based on experience, not belief." This was revolutionary for its time. American Christianity was largely based on dogma, on blind faith. Yogananda offered something completely different, a spiritual laboratory, where each person could make their own discoveries. Within months, Yogananda became a national sensation. Newspapers from coast to coast published articles about the young Indian Swami who packed auditoriums and transformed lives. His lectures attracted 15,000 people to New York's Carnegie Hall. Los Angeles Times described one of his performances as the most powerful demonstration of spiritual power ever seen in the West. But most impressive were the practical results. People reported physical healings, profound psychological transformations, spontaneous mystical experiences during his lectures. In 1925, Yogananda settled permanently in Los Angeles and founded the Self-Realization Fellowship, which would become one of the most influential spiritual organizations in the world. But it wasn't just a traditional church or temple. It was a center for spiritual research, where people of all faiths could learn practical meditation techniques, study comparative sacred texts, and most importantly, experience higher states of consciousness. The message was clear. Come as a Christian, Hindu, Jew, atheist, it doesn't matter. Here you will learn to feel God directly, regardless of your previous beliefs. Now we come to the part that will blow your mind. Yogananda insisted he was not a medium. He never held seances, never embodied spirits, never practiced psychography. In fact, he frequently criticized Western spiritualism, calling it an inferior form of spiritual development. But the phenomena around him were impossible to deny. Hundreds of witnesses have documented experiences that can only be called supernatural, and we're not talking about vague stories or legends. There are detailed records, letters, sworn testimonies from respected figures in American society. The case of death at a distance. During a lecture in Detroit in 1926, Yogananda suddenly stopped speaking and said, "Forgive me, but I need to focus on something urgent." He was silent for 10 minutes. Then he announced, "My disciple Richard Wright has just passed away in Los Angeles. I'm helping his soul through the transition." Hours later, a telegram confirmed that Wright had died at exactly the time described. Acura de Luther Burbank. The famous botanist Luther Burbank, a skeptic of spiritual phenomena, met Yogananda when doctors had given up hope for terminal cancer. After a few sessions of spiritual treatment, Burbank made a full recovery. He later said, "Yogananda is the most scientific man I have ever met, and also the most divine. But perhaps most impressive were his public ecstasies." Yogananda regularly entered into samadhi, divine absorption, in front of thousands of people. It wasn't a performance. It was real transcendence happening live. Witnesses describe his body becoming completely still. His breathing would cease for minutes, but his face would radiate a light that seemed to come from within. Photographers documented these moments, and the images reveal something that defies scientific explanation. Dr. M. W. Lewis, a physician and disciple of Yogananda, monitored his vital signs during these states: a barely perceptible pulse, bated breath, but intense brain activity. It was as if he were traveling to dimensions our science cannot yet map. People reported that simply being in Yogananda's presence was transformative. There was no need for conversation or treatment. His own energy changed the environment. James J. Lynn, a millionaire businessman and skeptic, attended a Yogananda lecture out of curiosity. Afterwards, he said, "I felt a wave of peace so intense that I cried and cried. They weren't tears of sadness, but of recognition, as if my soul remembered home." But what was Yogananda's secret? He himself explained, "These phenomena are not personal privileges. They are natural potentials of every human soul reconnecting with its divine source. I simply remind people of who they truly are." For years, disciples and publishers begged Yogananda to write his autobiography, but he resisted. How to put infinity into finite pages. It was only in 1946, after decades of maturing the mission in the West, that he finally dedicated himself to the project. Autobiography of a Yogiate wouldn't just be a book, it would be a dimensional portal disguised as an autobiography. When it was released, the book had a seismic impact on Western culture. It wasn't just another book about spirituality, it was an explosion of possibilities in the minds of those who read it. Steve Jobs reread it constantly and considered it his personal Bible. The Beatles' George Harrison said the book opened his mind to Eastern spirituality. Paramahansa Yogananda has become a mandatory reference for an entire generation of seekers. But the most impressive thing was how the book affected ordinary people. Executives dropped everything to pursue spirituality. Scientists began studying consciousness. Skeptics became meditators. The book wasn't just biography. It was a disguised manual of transcendence. Yogananda described encounters with saints who materialized objects, masters who resurrected the dead, yogis who lived without breathing for months. For the Western reader, it was like discovering that reality is much broader than official science admits. But Yogananda always emphasized, These are not fairy tales. They are real possibilities of developed human consciousness. At the center of all his work was Kriya Yoga, which he called spiritual science or technology of the soul. It wasn't just ordinary meditation, it was a precise system of consciousness development. Just as electricity can be conducted through wires, Yogananda explained, divine energy can be directed through the human nervous system. Using specific techniques, Kriya promised to accelerate spiritual evolution, what would take lifetimes of ordinary practice. Kriya could do in years, or even months. It was literally scientific spiritual acceleration. Yogananda also wrote revolutionary commentaries on the Christian Gospels and the Bhagavad Gita, showing the essential unity between all spiritual traditions. His mission was clear, to prove that all religions drink from the same source. In the months leading up to his departure, Yogananda began to show signs that he knew his physical mission was coming to an end. He intensified his teachings, completed unfinished projects, and began to speak more openly about the illusory nature of death. The soul never dies, he repeated constantly. Just change your clothes. And when you are truly united with God, you can consciously choose the moment of transition. March 7th, 1952. Biltmore Hotel, Los Angeles. Yogananda had been invited to a banquet honoring Binay Arsene, India's ambassador to the United States. During dinner, he was particularly inspired, talking about the mission to unite East and West, about the future of spirituality in the modern world. It was as if he were taking stock of his life. At the end of the event, he asked to recite a poem he had written about India, his spiritual homeland. The poem's final words were prophetic, where the Ganges, the forests, the Himalayan caves and people dream of God. I am sanctified. My body has touched that land. As he finished the poem, Yogananda looked up to the sky with an expression of absolute ecstasy. Then softly, it fell to the ground. It was no ordinary death. It was a final demonstration of spiritual mastery. Witnesses report there was no agony, no struggle. His face remained serene, almost smiling. Dr. Romesh Dutt, who was present, said it was as if he had consciously chosen the exact moment to leave his body. But what happened after his departure was even more impressive. Yogananda's body was taken to Forest Lawn Memorial Park and remained on display for 21 days, showing no signs of decomposition. This in the middle of a Californian summer, without any special embalming process. Harry T. Rowe, the funeral home director, issued an official statement that is still quoted today. Paramahansa Yogananda's body was perfectly preserved. There was no odor of decay nor any visible drying of the skin. This state remained throughout the period of exposure. To his disciples, it was the final proof that Yogananda had truly transcended physical laws. His spiritual realization was so complete that even death bowed to his will. Many disciples report that even after his physical departure, they continue to feel Yogananda's guiding presence, as if your expanded consciousness had freed itself from the limitations of the body to operate in more subtle dimensions. More than 70 years after his passing, Yogananda continues to shape global spirituality in unseen ways. Your autobiography of a yogi has never been out of print and has sold millions of copies in dozens of languages. It is considered one of the most influential spiritual books of all time, cited by leaders, artists, scientists, and seekers around the world. A self-realization fellowship, which he founded, remains active, with meditation centers spread across every continent, faithfully preserving his original teachings. But perhaps his greatest legacy is having planted the seeds of the union between science and spirituality, which today flourishes in research on consciousness, neuroplasticity, and quantum physics applied to the mystical experience. Renowned universities are now studying meditation as a medical treatment. Neuroscientists are mapping altered states of consciousness. Quantum physicists are exploring the nature of reality beyond matter. All this was considered impossible in Yogananda's time. He was truly a scientific prophet of spirituality. Millions of people today practice yoga, meditation, conscious breathing, without even knowing they are following principles Yogananda brought to the West. His influence has become so pervasive that it has become invisible. Meditation apps, spiritual retreats, holistic therapies, integrative medicine, much of what we consider modern spirituality, has roots in the teachings he laid down in the 1920s. And its central message remains more relevant than ever. You don't need intermediaries to experience God. You don't need to wait for death to touch eternity. Everything you seek already exists within you. You just need the right techniques to awaken it. So, after this journey through the life of Paramahansa Yogananda, what conclusion should we draw? Yogananda's life teaches us something that goes far beyond traditional mediumship. Being a true spiritual channel doesn't just mean receiving messages from other planes. It means becoming a living bridge between the human and the divine. He showed that each person carries within them dormant potentials, healing abilities, intuition, ecstasy, transcendence, which only need the right techniques to be awakened. Yogananda did not come to create passive followers. He came to awaken active seekers. His message was clear: don't idolize me. Use what I teach to discover the master within you. And perhaps this is the most revolutionary invitation anyone can receive: to stop looking for external saviors and start developing your own divine potential. If this story has awakened something within you, if you felt that there is much more waiting to be discovered within your own consciousness, help me to continue spreading this knowledge. Like this video right now, this tells the algorithm that this content needs to reach more people who are looking for answers like you. Share with anyone who needs to hear this. It might be exactly what someone close to you needs to take the next step on their journey. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because I have many more stories like this to share with you. And speaking of upcoming stories, in the next episode of this series, we will delve into the life of a man who achieved something seemingly impossible, uniting absolute scientific rigor with profound mystical experiences. A physicist who not only studied consciousness theoretically, but traveled through it, who explored parallel dimensions with laboratory precision and brought scientific maps to territories only mystics had described. A man who proved that the human mind can access realities beyond space-time and still maintain complete academic credibility. Who is this mystical scientist? How did he manage to keep his feet in science and his head in the stars? The answer will blow your mind. See you in the next video. And remember, your journey of awakening begins the moment you decide to stop watching miracles and start creating them.